In your opinion, how is selling or sales, I'm going to say evolved more than changed? How do you think that it's evolved?
Um, I mean, funnily enough, that's very much something that I use in training. I sort of often take people through the evolution of sales, particularly if I've got an audience that I think are going to sat there going, yeah, okay, come on, we've been in this for 20 years. I think, well, actually, let's just have a little look about how stuff has moved on. And then I'll kind of even go back to the 50s and sort of say, 50s selling, very much about process. So doing tried and tested things to make sure we do things right every time. And that's all good. Yep, great. We'll take some of that. Thank you very much. You look at the 60s, and I mean, this is very broad, but 60s was probably more of a psychological approach. Yeah, that's where the whole personality profiling, how do people think, what are their preferences, how can we adapt to that came along. Again, we'll train that, we'll use that. I will take anything that I think is going to help. So that's very much, yep, up for grabs. 70s, we probably started a bit more on really focusing benefits. What's in it for me? WIIFM, still use it because it's still very, very relevant. And there's lots of salespeople that still don't talk about benefits, featured dumps and the rest. 80s, yeah, probably take less from there than anywhere else, because for me that was very close type thing. You look at any 80s sales book, kind of, I get images in my head of Gordon Gekko from Wall Street and greed is good and all those kind of manipulative techniques, and think, okay, there's a little bit of stuff there. But if you think about it, the step change in the 90s into consultative selling, I mean, that's the biggie. The salespeople who were the best salespeople were doing what they weren't trained to do. They were asking the questions, and we know all the models and things which came out of that. And for me, that's a real foundation of what good selling looks like now.
Yeah.
But you can look back and say, that's 90s, So yes, we still use that, we still talk about it, but again, think more sort of noughties, if we call it that. We'd be thinking, yes, we need to consult, we need to solve problems, but equally, can we add value at the same time? And so that whole focus into generating insight to be able to add value at the same time fixing stuff, that was what moved the profession. And I do talk about the profession, which moves it on more and more. 10s, I'd say, yeah, needs, consultative selling, value-based selling, but probably more of the whole sales stature, as in, are you the person that can work with me to solve my problems and to deliver that value? I get your company, I get what you're selling, but actually I prefer to that person over there because they seem far more with it and far more able to help. So are you giving that right kind of sales stature or presence or profile, whatever you want to call it? Probably start personal branding if you like. We wouldn't have called it that then. And then we come to 20s, we come to now. And I would say that sales is probably more collaborative than it's ever been. That's the shift, I think, is that we're working with customers far more, we're collaborating, we're doing stuff together, co-creating. And so for me, that was the kind of the bit where I thought, well, this partnering skills thing, working together as partners, even if it's not a formal business alliance, if it's not, you don't have to be selling in channel even, direct salespeople can still use the skills and the mindset to be more collaborative. And I would say that's the very sort of current way of thinking if you want to be successful.